Welcome, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And yeah, Lisa, it's mid-September now. We're barreling towards an election. It's busy season for consultants that are headed towards government deadlines and fiscal years and all the things. And then let's, get ready to throw holidays in there and travel and all the things. So in other words, I've just shared my overwhelm with you. Are you feeling similarly? Just join me in the overwhelm.
Join you. I was feeling actually fine. And then you just listed off all of the things, and now
I
my
didn't
anxiety
help.
just went up a notch. Yeah.
Yes, I inadvertently traumatized Lisa, y'all. See, that's why we got to pay attention to what we say. But yeah, it's been interesting. I'm glad that we have the podcast to touch base on the things that are going on
Mm-hmm.
in the world, because frankly,
Yep.
based on everything that's swirling around, I don't know if we would make the time.
No,
So yeah, it's a nice built-in touch space, if you will.
it is. It is. Although the weekly
Mhm.
recording makes me more aware of at the passage of time. So,
Oh, yes, yes, yes. It's like, it's been a
yeah.
week already. Yes, it's been a week
Yep.
already. Sometimes less
Yes.
than a week, and it's still flown. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, Lisa, speaking of time flying past, let's talk about the word of the week when it comes to age or ageism.
Yes. Yes. Ageism. Okay. So funny story. Um, Shauna and I have been traveling for work, and she let me know that she was a member of AARP because it gives great discounts. And I'm like, what? How are you a member of AARP? I thought you had
Right.
to be way older to be a member of AARP, right? American Association of Retired Persons, I think, right?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
no, apparently, what is the age, Shauna? 45? 40?
I believe it's 35. Let me check while you're
Oh,
talking. But yeah, I believe it's
35. Yeah.
35.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had definitely made an association that the AARP was for individuals who are in retirement, and individuals in retirement tend to be at least 60 years old. Not everyone, but generally speaking. So, yeah, but apparently we could join AARP. So I'm already looking up how to do that so I can get some discounts. But it made me think about ageism, right? And the ways in which we make assumptions about people based on their age. And I think that there are many stereotypes and prejudices that we have related to age and how a person should be, look, or act based on their age. And then when we enact those and we make decisions, so we take a thought and make it action, that would fall into the category of ageism. Now, what I think is interesting is that we internalize this too. So, for example, we might say, oh, I'm having a senior moment, right? Ha ha, and that would be internalized ageism, right?
Hmm.
This belief that at a certain age you're going to have these moments to just forgive me for that, which is highly
Yeah.
problematic. The other thing I
Yeah.
think is interesting about ageism is the way that it's constructed legally in terms of age discrimination in the workplace. It tends to apply to people over the age of 40. But we know that age discrimination and ageism can work in the other direction. The assumptions that older people,
Hmm.
so people over 40, say, might make about 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 21-year-olds,
Right.
right?
Right.
In terms of
Right.
competencies, capabilities, those kinds of things. So we have not, as a culture, really kind of caught up, I think, both socially and legally to understand ageism as something that could operate on a spectrum from a
Hmm.
9-year-old to a 75-year-old and beyond, right? Like there's
Hmm.
all these different ways. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add there, but I think ageism is something we don't talk about a whole lot and we should do.
Yeah, we don't talk about it a whole lot, you know. Well, the first thing for everyone that now is interested, and this is like a free AARP ad. So the requirement specifically says, while AARP is dedicated to people over 50, there is no minimum age to join. So people of all ages can get those, membership deals. A good friend of mine who is a travel agent, she has been a member for, gosh, almost 20 years now. And for her, she said it gave her such great benefits on lots of different things, whether it's hotel or, rental cars, what have you. So that's how I learned about it. But to your point, Lisa, I think, this age discrimination piece is so poignant for me because I spent, the majority of my career, especially because I started work so early, which is a whole nother podcast around why one needs to start working earlier in life. But starting work early also means that you're often the youngest at work. And so what does it mean when, things now that I look back on that, I let roll off my back and it wasn't a big deal. Now that I know better, of course, I try to do better. So, those moments when I was 16, 17, 18, definitely, 20 and under, I do remember snarky comments like, well, oh, that's the nursery on that side of the store where I used to work, because all the young people that were coming back from college or in high school would work in that particular part of the retail store. So that was considered the nursery by the other employees at the retail store. So things like that we say, and yeah, it may be all in fun as far as having a good time at work, but fun for whom? If one was to do that for those that are legally protected, 40 plus, that would be a problem. So I think it's very interesting. And I wonder if there's a movement to expand the legal definition in both directions, because we have such a span of generations in the workplace. I don't know, but it begs the question there. So anyhow, I've been on the younger end of that spectrum. And now that I'm older and work for myself, hopefully I don't have to deal with the other end of it. But here we are. Good conversation to have. But speaking of this, very interesting. We have even more new words to talk about. Phase one gets into a Economist article that I ran across, Lisa, that the title of the article just really grabbed me. And I said, okay, I got to pause and take a look at this. The title was, "Is Western Culture Stopping People from Growing Up?" And before even reading the article, Lisa, my brain went back, of course, to experiences in higher ed, where FERPA law is real, very real there, where students of a certain age must sign off on parents or guardians or whomever, family members, to have access to certain information about their experience in college. And so given that, my mind immediately went back there where, of course, the parent in me, especially the parent that's stroking the check for this student to go to school, is thinking, why can't I see grades? Why can't I see this information? Why can't? When I've also, been on the other side where, how do we create an environment for people to mature? And if we're constantly not even helicopter parents, but we used to call them Black Hawk parents, where it was like they were in every single thing. If we don't have parents, guardians, et cetera, back up from those students to allow them to figure things out and to create solutions for themselves, then how will they ever grow up? Well, interestingly enough, this article really leans into that conversation of Kidulting, and I hope I'm pronouncing that the way it's meant to be pronounced. Kidulting, the mixture of kid and adult, where adults are in fact embracing being kids, infantilizing their experience. And I thought about this when I heard someone, and I almost didn't believe it until I read about it online, where an adult, young adult, was going into their first job interview and brought their mother with them, right?
No way.
Now, let me be clear, Lisa. I've always been a pretty good interviewer, but when it comes to interviews, there has never been a time, nervous or not, that I thought about bringing a parent with me or any second person with me, right?
Never.
And so the interplay between those types of experiences where the young adult who may be nervous and maybe new to the workforce is concerned or does want that extra support and is willing to say, hey, parent, hey, whomever, will you come with me? And the parent actually saying yes. Because let me tell you something. If either of those two boys came to me saying, hey, I'm interviewing for a new job, mom, I'm a little bit nervous, even if they did ask me to come with them, mom's going to have to sit outside in the car, honey. I will take you there. I will be your moral support. I will get you your coffee before your interview. I will make sure that your tie is tied straight. And anything that you need from me, I will be the moral support. But what I'm not going to do is cross the threshold of that doggone interview. And so, all this to say, this article is interesting to me because I'm wondering how much we as folks that lean into adulting, how much we're doing to enable the kidulting, and the kidulting needing to take its own responsibility for choosing not to engage with adulting. It's just fascinating, Lisa. I don't know what's going on here.
Is this so? Did the article talk about? Is this an across the board experience? So based on class, race, gender, is it? Did it go to that level?
It did not go to the deeper level of demographic beyond age or beyond, generation. But, to your point, I would hypothesize that frankly it should be, because for those of us who have lived identities where we've always had to survive and we have always had to solution create, I'm thinking this is probably leaning in one racial direction, Lisa. One amongst other identities, but yes.
Yeah.
It didn't explicitly say, though.
No, and I wonder whether level of family income has something to do with it as well.
Oh, but, yeah.
Yeah, this is. Woo. So here's what's the line here with our definition of ageism, and thinking about the ways that might work against younger people, right? Young adults that often get assumed to be incompetent or lacking in smarts, right? Or they just haven't been around the block enough yet to know where those assumptions are made. And then what you're saying is there are young adults who are actively not wanting to engage with being an adult, like being the responsibilities of what it means to be an adult and the accountability that comes with like living on your own or kind of getting your first job. And so in some ways that just kind of that reinforces the stereotype that manifests problematically with ageist beliefs, right?
Yeah, it connects right back to it. So it still, though, feels like a lot of the conversation that we've had for years in regard to over parenting, right, and this kind of roller coaster up to the over parenting. Because when I talk to other people, including people that are my age, many of which do not have children themselves, or they just may not have young people around them a lot. This goes back, Lisa, to that great conversation we had in the airport the other week around, we were talking about the systems around, for example, my boys in sports and school. And, well, when do you have dinner? Like something as simple as when do you have dinner is a complex conversation for people who are parenting in our current world. And so I'm wondering if the societal systems are doing a couple of different things. I'm not taking the onus off of individuals and individual households and parents. I'm not doing that. But there also are things that enable parents to over-parent, right? Like, whether it's fear, I'm afraid for you to walk home by yourself in this neighborhood, so I'm going to rearrange my entire day to drive and pick you up. Is that over-parenting, or is that just simply awareness of one's context and surroundings? Because it's not like 30, 40 years ago when Shaunna could walk home alone and there would be no problem. I just wonder how much of our systems are creating the opportunity to over-parent, which then gets us to the place where we never remove ourselves from the parenting role, even incrementally. And so that's when you have someone that's 20 years old going to the interview with their mama.
Yeah, okay, so I see what you're saying, and that's kind of what the title of the article points to, right, around Western culture. And now I'm thinking back to your example around higher education, and when we were in college, and folks
Yeah.
who are older than us, there was kind of this in loco parentis, right? This idea that the
Yes.
college was a stand-in for the parent or the family member, and family
Yes.
members weren't really that involved, right? I mean, some might have been, but in general, they weren't. But as
Mm-hmm.
we grew up and became administrators in that environment, it did shift towards the helicopter or the Black Hawk parent, where parents were a lot
Yes.
more involved. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and moms and dads became best friends of their kids, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily think is a bad thing, right? But I didn't hear from my peers in college that their mother or father was their best friend. And then when I was working in a college environment, I would often hear from 18 or 19-year-olds that their mother or father was their best friend and they would talk to them twice a day, every day of the week,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the shift that you're referencing around, and the
Mm-hmm.
systems then allow that to happen. And so you have someone who graduates from college who doesn't have the skills. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so it's a little bit of a swing, right? Because we joke about Gen X being kind of latchkey kids and folks that just basically did everything for themselves because no one was around. And you'd be
Right.
out playing in the street until midnight, and your parent might
Right.
come out and be like, "Hey, where are you?" But and then
Mm-hmm.
the next generation, and then the kids that we parent, it's like we've swung in the other direction, creating,
Exactly.
okay, now I'm going to really overparent, and that
Exactly.
also has problems, it seems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It has major problems. Well, and just, society in general that has now changed. So, you know, Shauna walking home from school as a Gen Xer being, first and foremost, a very extended family network in a very small concentrated area versus my sons, their next closest parents being at least 30 miles away. That's a different system to function within. Or, parents working at the same job their entire lives versus parents now working at different places, spaces, jobs, et cetera, traveling, et cetera. I travel more in a month than my parents traveled in their entire careers. That's not a brag, and that's not a good thing or bad thing necessarily. That's just the difference in the society we live in. And so, what does it mean with the society that we're in? The competing factors that are allowing young adults to opt out from the responsibilities of adulting. I
Right,
think there's
right.
something there to that. Like, because in my mind, the reason why the article is so interesting and in some ways shocking is that I never considered, even to this moment, I've never considered I'm going to opt out from adulting. Like, that's even an option. What?
Right.
No,
Yeah,
it's not an
yeah.
option. There are
Hmm.
some, depending on your, how you grew up, if you certainly grew up in a impoverished situation, there are 8 and 10-year-olds that realize that they have to do some adult things like make dinner for their little siblings or whatever it is. If you're in a certain mindset and a certain socioeconomic status, like you mentioned before, how much or little does that give you the option to adult?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never saw that as an option. Still don't see it as an option.
Yeah. I do think so. I would be curious to look at this from and cut it by demographics, because I think there's
Yeah.
probably something else going on there, right? Um, but I mean, maybe not. I mean, maybe I'll be proved wrong. Maybe I am making an assumption. um,
I
so I
found
don't
those
know.
data
Yeah.
assumptions are usually correct. So I'm interested to go back because the author in the article is talking to a number of people like Jean Twenge and some others that have built their entire careers writing on specific generations, and so
Okay.
I'm interested to see the comparison between the two. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But, again, I know that my bias towards age is like completely dripping out of this conversation. And I'm okay with that because I realize it's an intersection between so many different things. Like, it goes
Yeah.
back, Lisa, to that conversation we had before around, I forget what it was we saw on social media, but it referred to enjoying one's career or enjoying one's job. And even with career development for young people, for college age folks, helping them to find a career that they love. And I'm like, bullshit. I was never raised
Right.
in a situation where, oh, your job is to go find the job that you love. No, your job is to go find you a job that creates a living for you,
Right.
whatever
Right.
that may be. And
Yeah.
so some of the freedoms that folks are having throughout their human development for me is shocking, but I also know that's painted with the lens of all the layers of identity that I have.
Yeah. 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 The dream job, enjoy your job, play to your strengths, all of that stuff is
Mm-hmm.
not universally accessible to everyone, right? Because a
That's
lot
it.
of people are working out of necessity and don't have that luxury. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're well over our 10
Yeah.
minutes here, but I do think there's more to delve into there. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if there's any more commentary on this Kidulting phenomenon that we talked about
Yeah.
today. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have this visual, Lisa, of a little baby that's all dressed in a suit with like a briefcase going to work. Like that's my vision now that I've talked
yeah,
about this adulting word here.
yeah,
So
going in the other direction. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
it's like
Yep.
Doogie
Yep.
Howser. Do you remember that TV show Doogie Howser?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes. See,
yeah,
now we are aging ourselves by even bringing up the name of Doogie Howser.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
but let's go into phase two, Lisa, because I have been receiving lots of excited text messages from my mom. Remember now, my parents are both retired, so the majority of what they have to do all day is they should get a check from CNN, from Good Morning America. They should get a check from all those folks because that's what they do with a lot of their time. But I got some excited text messages about Ketanji Brown Jackson and her book that's coming out, Lovely One, which, first of all, the cover is gorgeous, y'all. If y'all haven't seen it, go out there and see the cover. But what an apropos person to bring up during this particular podcast, because for those of us who have spent the majority of our careers and lives probably in education, higher education specifically, knows that it is back to school time for everybody. Anybody that's in school, your behind is in school right now. K through 12, undergrad, graduate, doctoral, you're in school now. And so with that, Lisa, I am interested in a number of things. I'm interested in Ketanji's book. We have to put that on our reading list. I ordered a copy of it to send to my mom after she sent me those text messages. So she'll be reading it and probably telling me all about it verbatim. And at the same time, I wonder, Lisa, if she's going to bring up anything about her dissent with the affirmative action case in the book itself as a memoir, because wasn't that, maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought that was her first opinion.
Ooh, it might have been. It might have been. Yeah. It was late June 2023.
Okay. Okay.
So it might, yeah, we can double check that, but I think that it had a lot of importance and weight that she
Mm-hmm.
wrote it, and that the other two justices, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, joined her dissent. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So I know it was, I think it was her first, if not one of the first. And Lisa, with that dissent, which I'm still very proud of, and I read every single word of it when it came out. I want to know, because I have so many folks that still work in higher ed, some really close folks that still work in admissions at very large PWI institutions. I want to know, and I know I'm rushing the data because we won't know for a very long time in regards to how this is going to actually take effect when it comes to the numbers of admitted students, yield from the admitted students, that elusive number of students that chose not to apply to certain schools because of the affirmative action ruling, thinking that they may not get in for whatever reasons, or flat out that they just may not want to be in an environment where, yes, I'm smart enough, I'm intellectually ready enough to be in this environment, but do I really want to be at an institution that now does not want to consider the fullness of me in admissions? Again, I'm speaking from someone who doesn't know intimately the innards of admissions work. It can still be considered if you bring it up, but it can't be actively considered when it comes to quotas and so forth. So It's going to be a while, Lisa. It may be a decade, if not longer, for us to really get it. But based on the numbers that we have in front of us now, we know that Black enrollment has dipped already post the ruling. So MIT showed that about 5% of its incoming class of 2028 is Black, compared to 13% around average in recent years. Amherst College in Massachusetts, they also saw a drop. Black students made up 11% of its class in 2027, and just 3% for its class of 2028. And then Smith College, also in Massachusetts, 4% of its incoming freshman class is Black, compared to 4.6%. So, given all of that and those numbers, and we're going to see numbers emerging. I know for me at my alma mater, James Madison University, Black Alumni Association has still done a lot of additional work around admissions to still make sure that Black students are in the applicant pool, despite everything that's going on with affirmative action. So, Lisa, what do you think, whether it's just from your personal feelings about this or your data brain about this, in regards to when might we see some concrete effects of the decision? And also, I'm thinking about, what do I tell other parents, right? Because I have people that ask me all the time, knowing that I've been in higher ed. Folks will probably ask you, well, what should my kid do? My kid is smart enough to go here, but do I want them to go there? Do I not? Do I just throw my hat in the ring through the Common App and see what happens? What might we advise parents of folks to do post affirmative action ruling?
Yeah, I mean, well, Chief Justice John Roberts would tell you that there's nothing to be done because racism isn't a thing anymore, so everything is swell. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a year and a bit on since the decision. And just as a reminder to folks, it was a 6-3 decision that struck down affirmative action. You cannot take race into account as a metric in the decision-making process. However, students can talk about it in their essay, right? Which I think you mentioned.
That's right.
I don't know. I mean, Yale and Princeton, their numbers have stayed roughly the same this year. So it's like you said, it's early. It's a bit muddy or foggy, I guess, in terms of really understanding the impact. But I want to just reiterate your point that you said right at the beginning. There's a subset of students who now will not apply to some of these elite colleges. And that is almost an unquantifiable number, because how do you track something that doesn't happen, right? So outside of anecdotal evidence through school guidance counselor discussions and things like that, outside of trying to capture that en masse, there's not going to be a way to say, well, last year or 4 years ago, 30% of students of color at our school applied to go to Harvard, for example. This year, 11% did. There's not going to be a way really to quantify it. So that's where I think there's the danger or the import of this decision and its real consequences are going to get missed or lost, because we've got these enrollment numbers, right? And we know that there are dips in some cases and not in others. But what about all those people that are like, I'm just not even going to try now?
Yeah.
And that is the intangible that the 6-person majority on the Supreme Court doesn't understand. And I don't know, I don't know. I know that in some cases, the number of Asian American student admittance has gone up. In some cases, white students hasn't been affected at all, right? And all these white students that cry, affirmative action takes away my spot, right? When really it doesn't at all, because the spot wasn't yours to begin with. And look at that, nothing's really changed. But it's really harming the students who have been historically excluded. I'm at a bit of a loss to answer your question, honestly, because I don't know, but I feel worried. I have a pit in my stomach about it. Obviously, when it came down, and now it's coming back up again, because what frustrates me is the complete lack of accountability or reparation, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
for a generation of well, more than one generation of exclusion from higher education, and that there's no way to affirmatively rectify that, right?
Right, right, right.
Because white people get upset like that. Well, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? White people were the reason why there is multiple generations of exclusion in higher education, particularly for Black and African American people
Mm-hmm.
in this country. Like, that's what pisses me off the most, I think, is that
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
we ever get to a place where there is even a semblance of an equal playing field in terms of college admissions if we can't
Mm-hmm.
even rectify the 75 million foot difference, right, in starting place
Right,
that's been
right.
created by slavery and exclusion and Jim Crow and segregation and all of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
so I think colleges are going to be creative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but again, there's only so much they can do because the student has to apply. The student makes
That's
the
right.
choice not to apply because they are not going to feel welcome at a predominantly white institution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
An
Yeah,
admissions
yeah.
officer, that they're going to be hard, they can't admit that student who doesn't apply.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's exactly what I hear from my friends that are in admissions and still deeply care about principles of affirmative action as they do their work. They know that obviously legally they can't do it, but at the same time, you don't just flip a light switch to turn on or off your feelings of justice and reparation and equity about these topics as you work in those offices that are going through what they call reading season, the season of actually reading the applications. You know, the feeling and the sentiment and the principle, the professional principle is still there to care about those topics. And so what happens when you have, I'm oversimplifying here, y'all, but what happens when you're the admissions office that cares so deeply about this work and you have 100 applicants and 91 of them are white and male? And you have 50 slots. You do the math. We still know the majority of them are going to be white and male or whatever the
Right,
majority group is,
right.
because you can't pick from what you don't have. So, given that, I feel for the admissions folks, and I also feel
Yeah, yeah.
for any student or any family of students that may be grappling with the possibly already existing imposter syndrome that then
Mm-hmm.
connects with this lack of reparation in this way. So the counter, I think, Lisa, which is what I'm going to be watching, the counter of the data that we can't really see, I'm now interested to see if admissions goes up at HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, also HSIs. And so, any of those schools, I'm anxious to see, do those numbers then go up
Right,
because they
right.
went down elsewhere? And could that
Yeah,
be an indirect indicator of?
yes.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we will. So I think this is something to pay attention to at the start of every school year. I'm sure all the colleges will
Yeah.
release those numbers, and we don't know how this will trend over the next several years. But
Yes.
I think Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, that dissent is going to be one of the famous dissents, I imagine, that will be
Oof.
remembered through history. And in an interview
Mm-hmm.
just recently about her book, I think one of the NPR people asked her about her dissent, and or asked her about how she felt about it now, or whether it was in the book. I forget exactly, but she basically demurred and was like, well, people can read my dissent, if they would like to know more about how I feel on the issue. It was great.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Look, in other words, she said in one of the most polite ways, I said what I said. Don't take anything
Yep.
from it. Don't add
Yep.
to it. I said what I said, and I'm not going to do the emotional labor of recanting what I already said. Go read
Right.
it. Go
Go
read
read
it.
it.
So we're going to drop it in the show notes, y'all. We'll drop the link in the show notes to the SCOTUS website that does have the dissent that I think is like a permanent link, so that folks can take a look at it and read it for themselves as well.
Yes, and then get yourself on the book list for her book from your local library. I just did that. There was a 12-week wait, so it'll be a while.
12 weeks. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and jump into our last phase of the day, which is also kind of a downer. I'm like coming off of this affirmative action one, but
right.
So we haven't talked about this much on the podcast, but climate change, right? And how awful that is. There we go. The end, period. No. But so it sounds like in response to kind of this existential grief, depression, anxiety that is being created through the destruction of our planet and what that might mean for future generations, there has been a need that has emerged for what are being labeled as eco-chaplains. So individuals who are combining grief and pain and anxiety around climate change and the ways in which we are killing our planet and kind of how that creates problems for a person, and spirituality. So there's hardly any of these eco-chaplains right now. But it's interesting because, okay, stay with me here. So over time, the need for grief counselors for people who lose pets has emerged because for many people, a pet is a family member, and the need to be counseled through that pain is important. That's a newer emergence, right? As people have begun to understand the depth of connection that happens between humans and animals. I see this similarly, that this is an emerging acknowledgement that there is a depth of connection between humans and the environment, humans and the climate, and the fact that we are essentially standing still and kind of watching or condoning or allowing the deterioration of our natural environment that is going to have profound consequences for our children and our grandchildren, right? And yet there doesn't seem to be any action that's really moving the needle. And so because that reality has become more and more severe, this level of grief that people are feeling around that has begun to be recognized in a way that gives it credibility, if that makes sense. And so I see it similarly, like 25 years ago, you wouldn't have had grief counselors for people who lose their dogs or cats, and you wouldn't have had an eco-chaplain, right? Like it's just this kind of emerging recognition of the ways in which humans are connected to things, living things who are not also human, right? I guess would be a way to put it. So I just thought it was a really interesting development, and I'm wondering what you think, Shaunna, given your background. You know, and obviously you're raising 2 kids, so they are going to be living in this world, whatever that may look like, you know, for the next 60, 70, 80 years. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's what's interesting about it is when for those that don't know my personal background, you know, seminary experience, my master's degree is in divinity, specifically campus ministry, working in a number of different places and spaces when it comes to hospital chaplaincy, hospice chaplaincy to get through that entire process, college chaplaincy. I shared a little bit about my experience with the Red Cross and working with Hurricane Katrina relief. All of that mingled in kind of really takes me here because all of those particular forms of ministry have to have an overlay of grief somewhere, whether it is, like you mentioned, grief of a person, grief of a pet or an animal, grief of a previous life, grief over, gosh, it could be truly almost anything that you can lose. In divorce specifically, that's what really came up for me when I was thinking about this eco chaplaincy. Is that makes complete sense to me for someone like myself who is divorcee. It's been what, 4 years now. The interesting dynamic is not just what I felt when my grandfather passed, meaning this person is no longer here, I don't have them anymore, and I have to say goodbye, and the finality of that feeling. But divorce was, I'm saying goodbye in the role, but you're still around me all the time, right? And I feel the same way about the earth, and where this is going with this eco chaplaincy is folks that are grieving in the ecosystem that we're currently in and grieving the earth are saying, I'm having the slowest of goodbyes. I know that everything around us is just making the earth crumble, making, everything's overheating. The seasons aren't even the seasons anymore. Every scientist on the planet has told us this, and we are still watching the slowest goodbye of saying goodbye to something that you still have to see and interact with every day. And that's a different form of grief. That's not a clean goodbye, watching my grandfather's casket slowly go into the ground. That's a different goodbye. This goodbye is, oh Lord, I have to say goodbye and grapple with it every single day in a very active way. I don't have to grapple with my grandfather actively every single day after being gone for 10 years. It's a different form of grief. And so when this came up, I was like, wow, that's mind-blowing. And I completely understand. I may not need one or want one necessarily. I understand it. And if we see this slice of chaplaincy grow the way other forms of chaplaincy have grown, I would not be surprised at all. And the way the article parsed that out by age as well really got me, in regards to, you have two different groups of people that are grieving different ways. So when I think about going back to my grandfather passing, I've known him my whole life, right? And that grief is quite different from my grandmother's 64 years of marriage with him. That's a different grief, right? And so having these different age groups grieve the earth in different ways. Maybe the older generations are saying, we had a window of time to turn the corner and we did everything we could and it amounted to nothing. And young people are like, we have been screwed since we got here.
Right.
And they're both grieving the earth in two different ways. It makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, I really like the way you frame that around kind of the slowness of it. So it's like a train wreck in many ways, right? In slow motion, in that you're just watching it, and every attempt to create meaningful intervention falls on its face.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think is important around this kind of emergence of the eco chaplaincy is that the APA, the American Psychological Association, has done some research on this and has, talked about the fact that climate change has profound effects on people's mental health. And somewhere in the region of like 2/3 of people have experienced climate anxiety or a chronic fear of environmental doom, right? So this is also, so whether or not you would engage with an eco chaplain, that's one way to manage it. But the frequency or number of people that are experiencing this climate anxiety and kind of watching in slow motion things deteriorate, right? And however they manage that is enormous. If you're nearly 2/3 of Americans, I mean, that's a significant number.
That's a large number. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep. And that's a large number of people.
So there's the recognition for me is really profound and important. That there's something happening here and it needs to be addressed, whether that's through counseling, whether that's through chaplains, whatever it is, right? Like this is a big enough issue and it's harming enough people in addition to the harm that we are witnessing of the earth, right? That feels like a shift to me a little bit, a turning point of sorts. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and the mental health piece of all of it, right? Like, how many times have we heard, depending on your generation, just suck it up and get over it? And people are saying, no, I'm not just going to suck it up and get over it. I want to grapple with my feelings. I'm not ashamed of grappling with my feelings. And oh, by the way, when I share that I'm grappling with these specific sets of feelings, I find community in that. I find, whether it's a counseling circle or a chaplaincy circle or whatever it may be. And then let's add on the additional layer of, we haven't even added on the layer of the multiple faith traditions, religious traditions that are intersecting around this. So we're not just talking about Christian privilege on this either. We're talking about Buddhist traditions. We're talking about Jewish traditions. We're talking about a number of different chaplains who happen to have these intersecting lenses of the ecology, the ecosystem of our planet, and whatever faith tradition that they want to fold into that. That's what I think is so cool and unique. And I applaud folks that go into this area, because they're not willing to allow someone to bully them into abandoning their own feelings.
Right, right. And to bring it back to identity as well, beyond religious or spiritual identity, right?
Yeah.
We know that there is environmental racism. We know that the deterioration of our natural resources and the land around us and all of the associated pieces
Yes.
is more heavily and deeply felt in communities with fewer resources. And so there
That's
is
right.
the grief or the despair or the anxiety or the frustration or the hopelessness is likely felt to a greater degree in communities that are already vulnerable for a number of other ways, right?
That's right.
And so
That's right.
how are we better supporting or folding in and integrating that climate piece into kind of the management of their grief and anger and frustration around all these other things?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, so, all this to say, I give major props to folks that are willing to grapple with this publicly. And now you have folks where, this is an area of chaplaincy that isn't standardized yet or any of that. So I appreciate how tough it is to grapple with, what's the standard of good practice around this eco chaplaincy in regards to what are all the different intersecting areas of expertise that I need to know in order to do this well. Whether it's, theology or environmental knowledge or whatever it may be, that combination is going to be a whole new recipe of theological practice that it certainly has not happened before, has it?
No. So I guess we'll just watch and see. I mean, I would love to say that this emergent chaplaincy will go away because it is no longer needed, because we finally get our shit together
Right.
and do something that is responsive to the urgency, that helps alleviate the problems and people's kind of existential feelings around it. But I'm feeling like that's not going to happen.
I doubt it. I doubt
Yeah,
it.
and the grief will continue. So we
I
can
know.
keep an eye on this, but I imagine I think it will grow beyond chaplaincy. I think we will start to see mental health counselors outside of that realm that are
Oof.
specializing in supporting people with managing their anxiety and fear around the climate and wildfires, right? And this, like,
Mm-hmm.
where do I live? How do I afford to live? Because insurance is so much higher now that the climate is things like that, right? I think we might
Yes.
see growing areas more broadly than the chaplaincy piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I love what you're saying around, how do we grapple with that? Because, the whole, I'm still on my soapbox around the get over it grief piece of things. It's like that to me immediately signifies someone who has had some type of major loss or pain or harm, and they were, I don't know, they were unable to process it for whatever reasons. And so they assume everyone around them that deals with grief shouldn't have to process it either. Let's just step over it and move on. And so the what is it, the 7 stages now, it's the shock, the anger, depression, denial, all those pieces to the puzzle. Let's just skip all over that and just move forward as if nothing's going on. And certain folks are saying, no, I'm not going to just step all over it. So I appreciate the courage that it takes to not overlook one's feelings and some of it
Right.
can be debilitating in one's daily function. And so
Yeah.
we hope that folks surround themselves with eco chaplains and other people within their network that can make sure that they are functioning on a daily basis and moving. I don't want to say moving beyond, but moving with whatever
Right.
grief
Right.
they're carrying. Certainly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All
Well,
right.
look, can we, Lisa, on a
Mhm.
small tangent, depending on how this election works out, can we not have a political chaplain or somebody that can help
Oh
us out?
goodness.
Because
Yeah.
we're going to need somebody in our network, and I'm only saying that partially tongue in cheek here. There may be a need for support over a number of these major world experiences, right?
Yeah.
Like I wonder if they're like specific folks that are creating chaplaincy around the pandemic, and there's a number of
Yeah.
world changing, life changing experiences that have happened within the last 20-25 years that eco chaplaincy may be one of several things that we may want to focus on. But
That's a great
anyway.
point. And I just think back to 2016, and I definitely felt grief when Hillary lost. I mean, I realize part of that, my naivety was my whiteness there, but I definitely felt like I felt that, right? And I know that if Vice President Kamala Harris loses, it's going to be exponentially worse, I think, because we know the threat that a certain someone poses. And if he gets elected anyway, then it just is going to feel much more dire. So I will need that political chaplain, political counselor to be at my side.
Look, we may just call Ketanji. How about that? We can just all
Yeah.
commiserate with Ketanji, right? Over her decision and over the election. Let's just all commiserate.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm keeping hope alive, though. I'm keeping hope alive. I need
Keep it alive.
the divine nine to come out. I need all the identity groups that have been organizing on her behalf. I need everybody to show up and show out. So that's
Yes.
where I am with that.
100%. Yep.
So anyway.
Yep. All right.
All right. Well, this has been a good one, Lisa, as usual. But let me just wrap things up so people know where to find us. Please go to our YouTube channel. You're probably already there, but follow us there, subscribe, so that you can get an update every time a new podcast drops. Certainly, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Instagram, Unfazed Pod, LinkedIn, also under Unfazed Pod, and you can email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com. Of course, we have our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access all the new and also the way back when old archive shows. You can pull those up as well. But if you liked what you heard this week, please share it, leave a review, send it a link over to your friends, coworkers, family members, or others in this phase of your life. So, Lisa, until next time.
Until next time, see you all.